Okay, great. Just give me 1 second. Hopefully folks can see the slide I have up here. And we'll go ahead and get going. So welcome everyone to the MSME training webinar, training for mapping SMEs for the training that just launched. And we're gonna cover basics of what's going to be relevant for our mappers to know, both in the context of the training, but also just moving beyond to what our expectations and the deliverables for an actual project will be. So we'll just talk very briefly. By the end of this, we want to make sure that folks have an understanding of what the MSME role is. If there are any questions around that, we definitely want to address that while we're on the call, and we have some folks from academic technology who have a lot of experience on these course design projects that could help field some of those questions. There's a lot of vocab that'll be new, and we want to make sure that we make folks familiar with it, or at least make folks a little bit more comfortable with the new terminology, and that it's going to be new, and then it might be a little bit difficult. We've got some tools that we'll demo a little bit later that are relevant, and that'll be introduced in the training, but also covered and also used on the actual projects once we get to them. Yeah, and then just a quick look ahead to what the rest of the mapping training is going to entail, and just make sure that everyone understands that this is a team effort, and there are a number of people involved with making this training happen, a number of people that are going to be involved with you mappers in developing your maps and giving you feedback. So we want to make sure that you understand, what a course builder is, how they fit into this picture, and who their program director is, and how they fit into this picture as well. So just before we begin, I think we have a couple people from course building and academic technology here. Just to give people a little bit of context, the person speaking to you for the last few minutes is Chris Guy, and I'm a course builder at the American Women's College. I've been here for about 1.5 years, and I've facilitated trainings, mapping trainings, and our content curation training as well. And yeah, I'm just really excited to do this again and see all the awesome stuff that winds up coming out of this. Other folks who from academic tech or the course building team that want to share, and then we'll jump into the participants that are on this call as well. But if we want to start with folks on academic tech or a course building team.
I'll hop in. So my name is Jeremy Anderson. I am the Deputy Chief of Academic and Administrative Technology. So I oversee the course building instructional design team, the online support team, the data and infrastructure teams. So my role, I've facilitated this training in the past, and I'm here more as a support. If you guys have questions, I can chime in, but Chris will be your main facilitator this time through.
Hello, I'm Becky. I'm one of the course builders as well. I've been doing contract work with Talk for about 1 year, working in adaptive learning, and I just came on full-time about 3 weeks ago. So it's good to meet you all.
Hello, my name is Diane Michael Roberts, and I'm here as the same thing as Becky, a senior course builder. I've been here for about 3 years, and I will be putting the maps into the adaptive platform. I cannot wait.
Hello, everyone. I'm the real Diane Reinhardt, and I welcome everyone. I am the Assistant Director of Technology Services here at BayPath, and I've been here quite a while. And one of the things I do is deal with some of the content that is put into the courses after the students get to see it. So it's going to be interesting to get to meet you and see what comes from your deliverables, and I welcome you and thank you for being here.
Awesome, thanks team. Mapping SMEs on the call. Anyone feel free to chime in and tell us a little bit about yourself here.
Hi, I'm Michelle Salvador, and I am here to learn how to be a subject matter expert for personal fitness.
Hi, I'm Mary Flayhive, and I am here to learn the same thing, but in public health. So thank you.
Awesome. Do we have anyone else that's, if not, that's totally fine. Within the training itself, we have an activity that just allows you to provide a little bit more context as to who you are, where you're coming from, and what course you're working on. So for folks in the training, definitely feel free to jump in and add a bit of information about yourself if you haven't already. But if anyone, if no one else is going to jump in, that's totally fine, and we can go ahead and get started with, I guess the meat of the presentation. So before we talk specifically about mapping SMEs, I think it's important to just step back and provide a little bit of context as to what we're talking about when we're talking about adaptive learning. So I like this definition from Titan Partners. This company really highlighted three aspects of what adaptive learning is. It's a data-driven learning experience that relies on demonstrated performance from students, and part of that experience for students adapts or adjusts the content and the experience for their students based off of their performance. In regards to talk, we have a branded adaptive learning platform called Knowledge Path, or KP. We'll hear everyone talk about KP activities, learning assignments. So when you hear KP, it's our adaptive learning platform. And an important thing to note is that our Knowledge Path component is but one of the components within a course within one of our online courses. So we still have our discussions and we still have our assignments. So your essay or your presentation submissions in an online course, but we also have Knowledge Path that is really trying to cover the foundational learning material that students need to know in order to succeed in these discussions and these higher level assignments. So we'll talk about alignment in a little bit, but I think it's important to understand that in terms of alignment, Knowledge Path is sort of like the ground zero for the learning often in these courses, and what students are engaging with and learning with in Knowledge Path is really it's going to inform part of what they're learning in these later higher level assignments, as I was saying. So where do mapping SMEs come in this process? Essentially, we're asking the major deliverables for mapping SME, for the most part, are going to be developing a course competency matrix. This is a document that we'll demo live and is something that is introduced in the training as well. But it's just assuring the alignment of learning objectives to course competencies and essentially the actual learning, the adaptive learning experience as well. So making sure that all of that is aligned to our higher level outcomes. And then the course learning map, which again was something we'll demo in a second and talk a little bit more about, is really there to dictate the structure and the flow of the adaptive learning experience and establish relationships between, we use the word granular a lot. So within a course learning map, what are the relationships between the granular topics in a particular subject area that we're trying to define. So that's a little bit of vocab that leads into a little bit more vocab. So as I was saying before, the matrix is something that is kind of our starting place for mapping SMEs. It more or less allows you to get things down in a more linear or a list format, but it includes a lot of the information and requires a lot of thinking in terms of how do these tiny topics, these tiny concepts tie back into higher level objectives and then competencies, the real meat and potatoes of what students need to know by the time they leave a course. And as I had said, the course learning map is really a visual representation of the relationship between those granular concepts. We typically have 6 of them in one of our online courses. We have 6 weeks, so typically 1 assignment learning map or 1 chunk of this course learning map per week. Each tiny topic also has a name that'll become increasingly more relevant for our mappers. We call the individual bubbles or pieces of the map an activity. So you've got a small topic that's going to turn into a learning activity for our students, and a little bit less relevant for our mappers, but still maybe some good context to know. We've got a content and question template that is really informed by all of the work that our mappers will have done up to this point. It's essentially a tool that other curating SMEs, other members of a given project team, it's the tool that they'll use to indicate to the course building team what specific content and questions and interactions are going to go into that adaptive experience. So mappers are kind of dictating what the structure and overall picture is going to be. And then we have some other curating SMEs that are going out and finding the resources and the types of formative assessments that are really going to be driving what students are interacting with. So I know that's a lot, and we'll jump into a bit of a demonstration here in a second. So I'm going to open this up, but so we're going to go through a couple things here. What I want to make sure we accomplish is understanding where resources are. We have something called a project folder, and that'll be kind of like the hub where a lot of our resources are going to be for a given course development project, and things like your matrix. And we have something called a project plan that I'll show you in a second. That's also in these project folders. So baseline, knowing what a project folder is and how we get to it, and all the important and cool things that are inside of it that'll be useful to our mappers. So just give me a second. Should be able to pull it up. And so one thing that I think might trip folks up at the beginning, which is totally fine, is just making sure when you navigate to Google Drive, making sure that you're logged in as you should see BayPath University, and you should see yourself with your BayPath email. A lot of the files and the resources that we use are linked specifically to work with, to give you access essentially through your BayPath email. So we want to make sure that you're logged in through there, but that should be straightforward. And definitely reach out to me as your training facilitator if we're working through getting into the discussion post if there's some issues there. And definitely long-term reach out to your course builders if you have questions about some of these technical aspects of access to resources or just navigation within our project folder. But so the context of our training assignment is getting our mappers to think about adaptive learning, and essentially you'll be creating completing part of a matrix based off of the broad topic of adaptive learning, and then we'll be having you do creating one assignment or one part of a learning map that's also based off of adaptive learning. So this walkthrough is going to be in line with that. So just keep that in mind, but you'll see that you've got you should have a project folder that has the name of your course, obviously, that you're hired to work on, and the words project folder in it. So if we open it, got tons of different subfolders and things like that in there. You should see you've got a starting place course competency matrix that's just a blank one that is also listed in the training course. So you'll want to download that from somewhere, like so. You can just right click and download it, and it should be fine. And then you'll also see bubble instructions. Bubble is the tool, the mapping tool essentially, that we use to visualize and create the course learning maps. So for 1 second. And then something that I'll talk a little bit more about, but you'll be able to see it here is the project plan. That's kind of the tool that we use for our project management resources. So yeah, I can open up our, I've actually already gotten one started here, but this is what the course competency matrix looks like in a nutshell. On the left hand over here, we'll have our course competencies listed. So if there were more than one, we would put them down this list here. And across the top are where we're going to put our learning objectives. In the past, having facilitated this training a little bit a few other times, there has been some confusion as to where to get learning objectives or who's writing them or whose responsibility it is to create those. And that's something that I think is a really excellent opportunity to engage your program director about, because for some courses, some new courses, so maybe some of our community health, if they're going into this adaptive for the first time, or this type of course is coming into adaptive for the first time, we might not have the learning objectives created or to the specification or to the, in the same vein as the adaptive environment or what the adaptive learning environment facilitates. So you might, as a mapper, be responsible for creating learning objectives. And so that's just something to keep in mind, and we'll have, we worry about that a little bit less in this training, but it's definitely something to have on your radar in early conversations with your mappers, is that sometimes they'll be provided for you already, and the program director might have already put them in there for you, or you might have to put them in yourself and then align things. Or it could be, again, you're making some of them yourself. So at this bottom half is really where a mapper comes in to leverage their expertise and their subject matter knowledge. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but in our adaptive environment, we call them assignments, and we have 6 assignments, and it's typically 1 assignment per week. And the idea is that within this broad subject area of an assignment, there are a number of more granular topics that we're going to cover, and those granular topics, again, are called activities. So you'll see here that each of these is different subtopics or different more granular bits of information about the overlying idea of explaining the fundamentals of adaptive learning. So we've got things like ACI models, differentiated instruction, learning analytics, and so on. And so that's kind of the gist of it, is that you've got a broader topic and you're trying to set that up with the name of the assignment, in this case, fundamentals of adaptive learning. And then underneath that, you'll have your different granular learning activities. And then all of these X's are to indicate the alignment of a given thing to something else. So in this case, I've indicated here that learning analytics ties into basic components of machine learning and adaptive learning systems, and it also relates to explaining or enumerating the benefits of adaptive learning systems. And so you'll want to do that for all of your different concepts that you're creating here. And so the last thing I wanted to show very quickly, or one of the last things I wanted to show very quickly here with the matrix, was I guess a quick peer example of something that someone else did that's still in line and still following this model of we're working with the topic of adaptive learning. Essentially, a peer of yours, an earlier mapper, created something here. So I can pull that up. And so what you'll notice, and this is something that gets covered or is asked of you in the training, if you want to go above and beyond and really take it to the next level with your matrix assignments in this course, you can add your own course competencies and learning objectives to, just in addition to your the ones that were provided for you and the really core required talking about adaptive. So in this case, we had a mapper who was doing, this looks like a biology or a chemistry course. And so I think they went ahead and added a series of learning objectives specific to the subject area that this person was actually involved with. And so you can see that they went ahead and added a bunch more, and then provided, align those topics back up to the learning objectives that they created that were specific to the course. So hopefully that provides a little bit of another example and more of an approach to give this, alignment idea a little bit more context and a little bit more weight for you. And so we start with that. We start with our working with the matrix and ensuring that everything that we're going to produce, or that framework that we're going to produce, is aligned to our higher level outcomes. And Michael mentioned it at the beginning, but he takes the maps and builds them in our adaptive platform. Well, how do we get to those maps? How do we get a map for him to build out? And that's really where Bubble and visualizing this matrix comes into play. So I think I'll actually jump back. Bubble instructions, Bubble's the name of the tool. You can navigate to it and make sure that you sign up with your BayPath account. And let me see if I can just jump to it myself.
Hey, Chris, before we dig into Bubble, do we have any questions on the other end from trainees about that course competency matrix? I know that's kind of the biggest thing, the biggest first deliverable really of the training course. So it's kind of the first thing out of the gate. We want to make sure you really, really understand each component of that. And then Bubble will be the second half of the training course where you visualize it like Chris said. So any questions before we go on to Bubble?
Actually, I have a question if you wouldn't mind. So I did completely get that we need to talk to the program director in terms of who's going to be creating the learning objectives for our particular subjects, and that's fine. But as far as like the learning objectives, as far as the course competencies, are those being presented? Are we determining those? Where are the course competencies coming from?
So those are going to be provided 99% of the time. If you're on a course that hasn't been built yet and doesn't exist at all in terms of our course offerings here at Talk, then that's something that, again, might be a bit of a conversation. I imagine that your program director is working with developing a syllabus and developing other aspects of this course with you. And so I can't think of a course myself that I've been a part of where a mapper or someone in this role has had to develop the course competencies. So it's it really should be that as a starting place. That's a given that's provided to you, and then it's that question of just where are the learning objectives, and then do we need to add on to them a lot in terms of making sure that we have some that are going to be specific and making sure that they hit what we're going to cover in the adaptive environment.
Mary, am I correct that you're doing the community health? Was that right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so when we sent through the program proposal with our main campus, our provost council, we would have sent the proposal through with course level outcomes, but in that matrix, that next layer down, the module outcomes, the week by week, That
Right.
typically is not written when we send through the proposal. So that's the layer where you would probably need to engage with Marge to understand
Okay. Okay.
what has and hasn't been done. But the course competencies, absolutely, we need to have those in place for the course to be approved.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any other questions about the matrix here before we move on? I think that was a great question to start. No? If not, that's okay. I mean, as things come up, and we'll definitely have a little bit of time towards the end to go over anything else that might come up. But yeah, so we could jump then to visualizing what was first presented or first created by you, by a mapper, and visualizing that with this tool called Bubble. So when you come to it, make sure that you sign in and access it through your BayPath account. And I've got a map that I'm going to pull up in a second, but when you're creating one, you can just, it's very easy to just start a new map and you'll jump right into the same window that I'm going to be in, presented with here. And so let me see if I can do double windows in a second, but essentially this is the interface, and it's very zoomable, very easy to get, you know, as granular and as small. We have previous courses that wind up making, you know, introducing concepts from different courses, and so you have the option with a tool like this to make it as big as you can. But that's just more the, you know, advice about the interface. We definitely don't want it to be, you know, tons and tons of bubbles. But you can see here, and I'll try and get the two screens up. But I just want to pull them both up to show you a little bit more about what the relationship between the two is, because we've got all of these topics essentially are going to show up here. And that's kind of the idea, is that whatever's in the matrix is going to be here. And so we're going to, you're essentially establishing what we call, and this gets covered in the training, pre and post and co-requisite relationships between these granular topics. So the way I've constructed it, and I could show you how we actually make that in a second, but just for conceptual sake, you know, I have cognitive learning theory here, and I'm saying that that's a prerequisite to these later activities here. So the idea is that you're establishing these connections for broader topics that are, the advice that we give is, you know, is this topic A, so in this case, is learner needs in the 21st century essential or impactful to know in order to know anything about learner control? And then downstream is, in order to know anything about alternative media, is learner control going to be a very important part of understanding what alternative media is? So all of these topics build, we want to make sure that we're establishing prerequisite and post-requisite connections when it's absolutely necessary. So I've got a few concepts up here that aren't connected to anything, but they're still part of this learning experience, and they still fall under this umbrella term, or this umbrella assignment of fundamentals of adaptive learning. But I'm not, there isn't a need to just connect anything for the sake of connecting them. And I would encourage folks to really push themselves to establish those connections. Is it absolutely crucial that I say that a student needs to know topic A before they move on to this later topic B? And so just I guess a little bit technically, so working within the tool, it's very easy. I can double click to add another concept here. And I'll just say requisite relationships. That's a bit long of a title, and something that you'll want to work with your course builder on is identifying, and I will also give feedback in the training when we get to it, about being as specific as possible with naming your activities, but also keeping the actual titles succinct, because if we start introducing lots of, too many phrases or too much into an activity title, it's going to be very easy for a curating SME to either be confused as to the scope of this activity or just to present too much information. And I guess another way to think about that would be we recommend, or we tell our students who are introduced to a knowledge path course and a knowledge path learning experience, that each of these bubbles on their learning map should take them about 20 minutes to get through. So that's 20 minutes of learning, and then that's not that much. So if you find yourself working with the matrix or mapping things out, and you're thinking that, can students really cover what I'm talking about or what I'm trying to talk about in 20 minutes? If not, if it's too much, then you're probably going to want to think about disentangling that topic into smaller components. And that's something that, with your subject expertise and with the course builder's feedback and your program director's feedback and giving the final stamp of approval, you might be able to work through that. And then just I guess the last thing that I'll show is just if you click on this, any of the bubbles here, it's very easy. I don't want to do that, but it's very easy to establish connections to a given bubble. And yeah, again, I think just for demonstration purposes, I don't know if that conceptually was the right connection to make, but it's very easy to adjust the map that you, adjust the connections that you want to make there. And so one thing that you'll want to keep in mind, and that I think ties into our project plan that I had mentioned a little bit earlier, is sharing of this learning map. You'll want to make sure that once you start creating it, you're able to share it to your program director and to your course builder. And you can do that very easily up here. You can get your link and copy it. And then again, a lot of the resources are going to be housed inside of your project folder. And for our purposes, we ask that our mappers link something. I think this might be the right one, or is it the wrong one? Yeah, we can use this one. So what you'll do is you'll come in once you complete your first, create your first KP assignment learning map. You'll link to it in Bubble. And then once it's finalized, once we have the finalized map ready to go, we'll make sure that the most up-to-date map is linked here. So that's okay. And we talk a little bit more about the project plan in the training, but I think it's just important to know that the resources you create are going to be housed inside of the project folder, and then specifically for ease of communication and collaboration, a lot of the matrix and the bubble map are going to wind up being linked in here by our mappers. And so I think, I guess a way to take that step back for a second, I just wanted to show, and I think we have time. This is something that I think will maybe help folks bridge the gap between what might be, an easy to look at, but kind of simple tool or visualization. How do we get from something like this learning map? And this is another example that's in another of our training courses, but how do we get from this to an actual adaptive experience? Or what does that actually start to look like? And so we've got, this is taken from one of our English courses. This little bit is mapped out in Bubble, and it's linked here. But if I scroll down, and this is in another resource that we have, you should be able to see it. It might be a little bit tricky, but this is a screenshot taken from the actual Knowledge Path tool or the assignment in the platform itself. So this is what students are going to be seeing when they come into their Knowledge Path assignment. So it's the same topics and a very similar layout in terms of how students are, what the relationship between concepts is, but it's obviously in a very different interface. Again, if you're curious to see what the finished product looks like, there are a number of example knowledge path assignments that are listed inside of, that are linked inside of our training course. From the module view, they're not graded and they're not required to complete the course, but they are there. And I encourage you, if you're curious, they're from a few different disciplines, so you can definitely start to see what that experience is going to look like for a variety of different kinds of courses and course developments. And they definitely have different shapes and different flows to them. So it might be good if you have some questions or you have some time to look at those. So do we have questions or comments about working in Bubble to create a map so far? Or again, going back to the course competency matrix, if anything else sort of came up, I definitely want to take some time to address any questions that folks have. Nope. Are we? If we're good, that's totally okay. Let's see. Got that. Something just next part of this conversation would just be reiterating some of what's already come up, but thinking about or looking ahead to the rest of the training course. It's broken up into 3 modules across roughly 3 weeks, and we've got our adaptive overview and what it is to develop courses and what our model here is at Talk. The next module is really where things pick up, and we start talking about designing for adaptive and thinking about how to, some more detailed information about the, thinking about the course competency matrix, but then actually using it as a tool to establish the alignment piece for your adaptive component of your course that you're working on. And then module 3 is talking about taking, again, that matrix like we just demoed here, taking that matrix and then turning it into a visualized course learning map or an assignment learning map in our case, because we're only going to be asking you the core requirement of the assignment that you'll be building towards is working out visualizing one sample assignment based off of the topic of adaptive learning. So what I just demoed was a worked example of that. So I can share that out if it's helpful, and we have some other examples that we can definitely share with you. But as you're going through the course, you'll be asked to think about this new information and start to apply it with the tools and with the going through the process that you will rely on for your actual development projects. And then after that, you guys are free to go and actually work on the projects and do awesome stuff with your project teams, which brings me to project resources. People are going to be incredibly valuable, and communication, I think, is going to be incredibly important to prioritize working on these projects. For a lot of you, this might be a very new way to design and develop courses, and that's totally okay. I've run through a ton of new vocab and information, and there's going to be tons of things that didn't stick, and that's totally fine. Communicate, reach out to your course builder, reach out to me during the training to ask those questions and to get feedback. There's a lot of opportunities for feedback within the process that you'll be working with during the length of your contract. So definitely get comfortable communicating, being not confused or but ready to ask questions or needing to ask questions. And I would also say that rely on your fellow SMEs going through this experience, because you're all in it together. And I think working in both similar and different areas, depending on what subject area you're in, I think will lend itself well to really, really interesting opportunities to share insights and really build that community of knowledge around such an, I don't know, exciting type of project. I definitely wanted to open it up to folks on the call from the course building team and academic technology, if we still have them on the line, share one bit of information that they want to make sure gets prioritized and is relevant for our mappers here. So if you've got something you want to emphasize that was mentioned in the training or mentioned on this call so far, or just anything that you think will be really important to use, now would be the time to share.
Hey, Chris, this is Diane. So I'm going to add, because I think one of the most important things that I see from a student perspective is when you're thinking about your making or the nodes, remember how he talked about 20 minutes in those nodes, and thinking about as you're building these concepts, the consistency would be the one thing I would say is one of the most challenging things that our students face. If we have one that's 20 minutes and then one that's 60 minutes, then they get thrown off because they plan their timing saying, well, this one was 20, this one was 20, this one was 20. Now all of a sudden I have one that's 60. What do I do? So that would be the one thing I think is the most important, is the level of consistency that you build in really, really helps our students quite a bit.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that or emphasizing that.
So I guess I'll add something. That was really great. Like a great piece of advice from Diane. Yeah, you're doing the job, you guys here, that everyone likes the most. So don't tell anyone else that you get to map, because everyone really enjoys it. It is kind of fun in kind of a Zen way. But don't worry about getting it perfectly mapping out your program right the first time. That doesn't really happen. And we'd rather err on the side of having fewer connections rather than make your map look really pretty. But if some of the prerequisites aren't true prerequisites, it's not really going to help out the students very much. So it's okay to leave like a little bubble by itself. And sometimes I use the example, well, you don't really need to know the works of Shakespeare to understand the works of Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, maybe it can help and maybe you can get some cool inferences, but I wouldn't classify those as true prerequisites. So that's just something to think about, is how you got to the point in your expertise and what steps that you took to get there. So that's it. I hope that was helpful.
Any other thoughts from course builders or academic tech? No? Going once? Going twice? Okay, so any final thoughts or questions from our mappers? This kind of wraps up everything that we wanted to cover, but I definitely wanted to leave time if we have any lingering thoughts, concerns, doubts, things that we want to talk about before jumping off. This isn't the last opportunity, as you know, as should be clear by now, to have those conversations and to get feedback and to field questions. But this is a good chance because we have so many great perspectives in the room, so to speak. No? Well, I think that can certainly wrap it up. We'll be able to share out this recording soon after and add it to the training course. And as I said, definitely feel free to reach out with questions to me going through the training. And yeah, long term, really get comfortable reaching out to your course builder, your program director, and your fellow SMEs to ask questions and to really talk through this new and exciting experience.